I want to tell you a story that changed the way I look at people forever. It happened about 2 years ago on one of those cold, gray mornings in late November. The kind of morning that chills you to the bone, no matter how many layers you have. I had an early meeting downtown that day, but I got there a little too early. I figured I'd find somewhere warm to sit for a bit, maybe grab a cup of coffee and relax. That's when I spotted this little diner on the corner of 5th and Main. It looked like one of those places that had been there forever. Nothing fancy, just a small-town kind of spot with foggy windows and that familiar smell of coffee and bacon. I pushed open the door and stepped inside. It was quiet. A few older folks were scattered across the booths, most of them sipping coffee, some reading the paper. The waitress behind the counter gave me a polite smile, and I slid into a booth near the window. I had just wrapped my hands around a warm mug when the door opened again. He walked in slowly, an older black man, probably in his late 60s or early 70s. His coat was thin and had holes in the sleeves. His pants were worn, his boots covered in dirt. He had a kind of sadness about him, the kind you can't fake. You could tell he hadn't had an easy life. He didn't walk in like he owned the place. He walked in like he hoped nobody would yell at him. He stepped up to the counter, and with a gentle, almost shy voice, he said, "Excuse me, sir. I don't mean to bother you. I was just wondering if I could get a cup of coffee. I don't have much, but I'm real cold." Before he could say another word, the owner of the diner, a big white man with a flushed red face and a dirty apron, snapped at him. "You think this is a shelter? We don't serve beggars in here. Get out before you scare off the customers." The whole diner went dead silent. You could have heard a pin drop. The old man froze for a second. His eyes didn't show anger, just hurt. Deep, tired hurt. He nodded slowly and said, "Yes, sir. Sorry to trouble you." Then he turned and walked back out into the cold. I sat there frozen. I couldn't even move for a second. Something about the way he was treated, it just didn't sit right with me. It wasn't just rude, it felt cruel. I took a last sip of my coffee, dropped some cash on the table, and walked out after him. I wasn't sure what I was going to say. I just knew I couldn't let that be the end of it. He was sitting on a bench just down the street, hunched over, his hands shaking as he tried to light a cigarette. I sat down beside him and offered him my coffee. He looked surprised. "You didn't have to do that," he said softly. "I know," I replied. "But I wanted to." We sat in silence for a moment before I asked his name. "Clarence," he said. Clarence and I started talking. I don't even remember how long we sat there. Time kind of stood still. He told me he'd been homeless for almost 5 years. Life had fallen apart after his wife died. She'd gotten sick, and even though he had insurance, it wasn't enough. The bills piled up. He lost his house. Then he lost everything else. But then he told me something that I'll never forget. "I was in the Marines," he said. 22 years, 2 tours in Vietnam, got a Silver Star and a Purple Heart. I bled for this country, and now I sleep under bridges. I just sat there. I couldn't believe it. This man who had given everything for a country that hadn't given much back was now being tossed aside like garbage by people who never asked for his story. That moment stuck with me. I couldn't just let it go. That night, I went home and did some digging. I searched his name and found him in military records. There it was, Clarence Johnson. Silver Star, Purple Heart. His photo in uniform, younger, proud, full of life. I printed it out and went back to the diner the next day. The same owner was behind the counter wiping glasses. I walked up and laid the paper in front of him. "This is the man you threw out yesterday," I said. He looked at it, confused at first. Then his face changed. He went pale. I didn't know," he mumbled. "Yeah," I said. "That's the problem. You didn't even care to ask." Word spread fast. I shared the story on social media, and within a week, the local news picked it up. People started showing up to support Clarence, veterans, families, even strangers. They brought him food, clothes, and warm blankets. A local veterans organization stepped in and found him housing. They helped him get back on his feet, connected him with medical care and a part-time job helping other homeless vets. As for the diner, let's just say business hasn't been the same since. People talk, and when you show your true colors, folks remember. Now, Clarence lives in a small apartment on the west side of town. It's not much, just a one-bedroom on the second floor of an old brick building. But it's clean, it's warm, and for the first time in years, it's his. There's a little plant by the window that he waters every morning, a worn-out armchair he calls his thinking spot, and a faded photo of his wife sitting on the dresser beside his bed. He told me once that it's the first place he's had in years where he can lock the door and sleep without fear. "It's not a palace," he said with a smile, "but it's mine, and that means everything." We still talk all the time. Sometimes we sit on his small balcony and drink coffee while the sun rises. Other times we meet at a cozy cafe downtown, one of those places with old jazz playing in the background and the smell of fresh bread in the air. They know him there. They greet him by name. They treat him like a person, like he matters, and you can see how much that means to him. One morning, while we sat across from each other, hands wrapped around warm mugs, he looked out the window for a long time before saying something I'll never forget. "I don't want pity," he said quietly. "Never did. I just wanted to be seen. That's all. Just seen." He wasn't asking for money. He wasn't asking for praise. He wasn't even asking for help. What he wanted, what we all want really, was dignity. A sense that he still mattered in a world that had tried to erase him, and that hit me hard. Because I realized sometimes that's all people need. Not handouts, not speeches, just one person to stop and say, "I see you, I hear you, you matter to me." It sounds so simple, but it can mean the world to someone who feels invisible. Clarence taught me that, without trying to, just by being who he is. I'll never forget him, not just because of what he went through, but because of how he held on to his humanity through it all. Even when he had every reason to be bitter, he stayed kind. Even when the world turned its back on him, he never lost his sense of grace. He reminds me every day that everyone we meet is carrying a story we know nothing about. A past, a struggle, a pain they might never speak of. So be kind. Always. Look a little deeper. Listen a little longer. And never forget that even the quietest soul is worthy of love, of respect, of being seen. Because sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones the world tries hardest to ignore, and sometimes all it takes to change a life is simply noticing.